Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Today's guest is Misha Sher, the Global Head of Sport, Entertainment and Culture at MediaCom, one of the world's biggest media agencies. Misha has been in charge of the agency's relationship with legendary footballer Pele since 2012, helping him create high-profile relationships. Prior to this, Misha has also worked at Fox Sports, Rangers Football Club in Scotland, and Soccerex. Get ready to learn about his work with Pele, Mesut Özil, Vinicius Junior, and other talents, why he co-authored the book Art of Branded Entertainment, his personal journey from when he immigrated as a 13-year-old from Ukraine to the US, and much more. Misha Sher, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Good to be with you, Marcus.
Great to talk to you. And you are the Global Head of Sport, Entertainment and Culture at MediaCom. So can you tell us a little bit about the role and about the company?
Sure, happy to. So MediaCom is one of the world's biggest media agencies, which means as a business, we invest hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars of our clients' money. So brands, for those who are not familiar, in different areas of advertising or media. So online, offline, TV, digital, social, and everything in between. That's the core business of MediaCom. The business that I run, which sits alongside of that, is basically all the investments that our clients would be making in areas of culture. So not just advertising, but in sport, music, film, influencer marketing, gaming, talent. So we live in a world where people are increasingly switching off advertising. They don't want to be interrupted. So there's demand for and the need for companies to reach people where they're increasingly spending their time without interrupting the experience. Hence the need to show up in places and culture where people are spending time. So that's what we do. And it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. And where are those places that you mentioned now? I mean, it's not in the newspapers and the television so much more, I guess.
No, I mean, look, people are, I'm giving an example. A lot of people are spending time, let's say, playing video games. So you now, for luxury companies, I shouldn't say rather, because they still, for example, print media and, billboards still play a big role in how they connect with consumers. But it wouldn't be out of place for, a company like Chanel or Chloe or Louis Vuitton to launch their collection inside a video game, for example. So that's an example of thinking outside the box and traditional places where we would, as people, as customers, as consumers, would interact and discover products and companies. They're now looking at ways in which they can show up in movies that we watch. So let's say it's integration into, James Bond or Ted Lasso and, places like that, or video games, or lots of what we in the sports industry call sponsorship, right? So how do companies like Coca-Cola or Emirates or others leverage the power of sport to show up in the moments when we are highly engaged, highly emotional, and as a result are much more likely to interact and engage with the message that they're putting across.
So one aspect of what you do is that you find a suitable place for companies of where they can do their marketing. So maybe if it is in a video game, or if it's better suited on social media or somewhere else.
Correct. Yes, we have to apply the sort of cultural navigation process where we help that client, because every company is different in terms of the products they sell, the people they target, where they are in that, on that journey, what their current priorities may be. They might be relaunching a product. They might be launching something new. They might be looking for a different audience. And it really, there are no two situations that are the same. And depending on that criteria at any given time, we will take a client on, on that journey. So, that's mostly what our business does. The other part that I should have mentioned at the beginning is that we work with some talent where we help talent basically build a personal brand. So applying our understanding of how some of the most successful companies are built, whether that's Coca-Cola or Apple or Nike or Amazon, taking that knowledge or understanding of how consumers behave, of tech companies, where they are, how they interact, and help talent build a brand around themselves, which is then relevant to people, which is engaging to their audience, and which ultimately has the opportunity to monetize and commercialize beyond what they do in their particular sport.
Yeah, so does it differ a lot working with talent versus working with companies or brands?
Yes, of course. Most of the companies we work for are big, established, well-known brands like Coca-Cola or Google or Uber. They are huge companies. They've been around a long time. They're very well established in how they, and how they operate. We just help them in certain elements, right? In certain parts of their journey. Whereas with talent, you basically build that from scratch. Now they may be famous or well known in a particular sport, but that doesn't make them a brand. So taking them on an entire journey of identifying sort of who they are and what they want, where they want to be, how they want to be seen in this really busy universe in which we live, where their ambition is, how they want to come across, where they want to build audiences, and ultimately what's their ambition in 3, 5, 10 years time. How do we help them build, particularly in the world that we live today, a genuine enterprise model where they can have appreciating asset to their career, whereas, as we know, the playing career eventually finishes. So what we're doing is trying to build something that can last for many, many more years after their retirement.
You mentioned to me before we hit record here that you're working with a Swedish coach for soccer. I know that you work with some professional football players as well. How do you find that, unique touch to every strategy for this? Because it's a coach is different from a player is different from a company, and so on and so forth.
And I find that the most fascinating thing, because I'm fascinated with people, and I'm fascinated with so much, with everything that I've learned over the years in watching how successful companies operate. And what I've always found quite interesting is they've always taken the time, those companies that I've spoken about that we admire, the Disneys of this world, the Apples, the Nikes, they've taken time to really understand what they're all about. What is the essence of their brand? What's not the products that they sell, but the brand, right? That's the difference. Why people buy their products, not because they necessarily think the products are the best. They buy into what the brand represents. And that's the strength of those companies. And that's why they're so successful. Now, I take a similar approach to the talent that we work with. They're all different. As you say, a female player is different from a male player, a retired player or a retired athlete is different from a current athlete who's perhaps 19, 20, who can build something. And you have to take a very different approach to all of them, because people are different. The environment is different. There are no two situations that are the same. And whilst you can apply a certain rationale in terms of how the process that I would take them on, the journey I would take them on, there are certain parts of that are quite similar. How do you go about building a vision, creating a proposition? How do you start to package that? How do you take it to the relevant places and so on? Yes, those things are similar, but what in terms of what they are and how they apply to different people is very, very different, very, very different. And you have to navigate that accordingly.
Yeah, in order for it to work, it needs to be correct for that particular individual, of course.
It does. And the most important thing is really taking the time to develop that strategy in the beginning of where you're trying to get to, and then sticking with that strategy, because these things don't happen. They don't happen overnight. And oftentimes people think that just because you're well known or because you've had a good season, it means that immediately that translates into all other areas that are related to commercial well-being. And the answer is no, that doesn't happen like that. So we just, in the same way that if you want to, when you set out to be a professional player, you aspire to be a professional player, it takes more than just getting yourself a good agent, right? You have to be good enough to play at a certain club, in the same way that if you want to enhance your fitness, you will hire a personal trainer who will work with you and will put you on a plan with a diet and rest and sleep and everything else that will move you on that journey from where you are to where you need to go. So that's a really important aspect of what we do, is that it's not something that just happens on its own, just like all other areas of athletes' life don't happen on their own.
Yeah, on a previous episode, I talked to Dr. Erkut Sogud, and it's also how you and I were connected. Mm-hmm. And he was talking a lot about that he has, I mean, you have helped him a lot, he said, and also that he likes to bring in specialists for different needs of his clients. And that's where you came in, I guess. But it's interesting to see from an outside perspective. So it's the talent, obviously, but then they have their lawyers, they have their agents, they have help with marketing, they have help with maybe PR. So how is that whole like ecosystem, and how is your role? I mean, are you communicating directly with the talent or going through the agent, or how is that?
Sure. It's a great question. So what makes Erkut a great agent is that he knows exactly what he's good at, and he knows where he needs help. And that's how every agent should be operating, because the idea that we're all equally as good at all these things is impossible. I mean, that's just impossible. If you're a player agent, your job is to make sure that you're looking after the talent most of the time, and that you are maintaining and building relationships with football clubs. That means that just by the nature of the work, you are not going to be most of the time interacting with the Pepsis and the Googles and companies like that. You're not going to be dissecting the DNA of how these brands are built. You're not going to be building relationships with TikTok and Instagram and so on. And that's normal. That's okay. And that's why you bring people in depending on what you need to support in those, in those areas. I do exactly the same thing, right? So I know what I can do, what I'm good at. And if I need a designer to help me build visual identity when I'm working with talent, I'll bring someone in. I'll prepare a lot of that, but I'll bring someone in to help me develop that. If we're trying to build an audience on social media, for example, let's just say in markets like China, I will bring partners in to help me do that, because I don't know China. I don't know I don't know the platform. Well, I know of the platforms, but I don't know how the algorithms and how those platforms work, Weibo and WeChat and so on. So I will want to work with a partner who understands how audiences are built, how they interact, how and so on. And I can work with them to help me on that. And Erkut does the same thing. He's got an agency in Germany that's been helping Mesut for many years. So I take the same approach. Because I'm not an agent, I can work with people like Erkut. I can work with other agents like Vinicius Junior's agent, for example, just looking after the commercial and brand part of what they do. So I'm here to complement what they already offer their clients rather than compete with them. So, and that's worked well. That's worked well for me because there's a clear, separation of what we do. So I'm not there I'm not a threat. I'm there to grow the pie rather than take a slice out of the same one that's already there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. So this passion that you have for marketing and sports, how did it start?
I don't know actually how it started. I mean, I've been in sport. I was a player. I grew up playing football since as long as I can remember. I must have been 4 or 5 years old when I started. I played very competitively growing up, all through childhood, my teenage years, and had a short stint professionally. And then after a short stint in investment banking, I went back to football. I think to answer your question, I didn't have a specific, I think, sort of fascination with marketing, but I was searching for something within myself. I think I knew that I loved sport. I loved football. I loved people. I loved being around people. Working in banking didn't satisfy that. So I sort of followed that. I came over to Liverpool. I did an MBA. It gave me an opportunity to learn about different parts of the football industry as it was developing in early 2000s, commercially and in media marketing and so on. And I think it was more, I think where I am now is more of an evolution of just sort of finding myself in different types of companies, seeing what I enjoy more, seeing where I really thrive, and just really, I guess, paying attention to what are those moments, what are those situations in which I feel really bring out the best in me, and what do I really enjoy, and trying to do those things more often than not, right? So that, I think that's how I got to where I am. I didn't set out to think that, to say that I want to be in sports marketing or talent management. I was very lucky to get a job here working with Pele, and that opened up my world to people and the type of work and the situations that I hadn't been in previously. And I enjoyed it, and I wanted to do more of that. So I invested a lot of my time learning about marketing, learning about companies, learning about the universe that surrounds marketing. So just so that I can really genuinely understand this world, which I'm now operating. So, and it's just sort of evolved, I suppose. And my interest has grown, and it's become something that I'm good at, and that I choose to spend a lot of my time doing.
Just came together.
Indeed.
You said Pele. You mean the legendary soccer player?
Yes.
What did you work with him on?
So I managed all of his off-field sort of commercial activities for off-field, of course, or off-field, because I started working with him when he was in 2012. So he was 72 at the time. But this was going into the World Cup in Brazil, the Olympics in Brazil. Obviously, Pele is a huge name. Is a big name in not just in football and sport, just globally. It's probably the most iconic name on the planet. Yeah. But he didn't do particularly well in terms of genuinely nurturing the power of his brand, not with endorsements, not with licensing, not with anything. The likes of Michael Jordan, for example, or Jack Nicklaus, and some of the other stars in other sports have been able to do. So I got an opportunity to come into this group to do that job. I hadn't done that job in the past, so it was a first for me. But I really enjoyed it, and that's given me the opportunity to go on and work with people like Mesut Özil and Eni Aluko and Vinicius Junior and others.
It's a dream job for many, I think.
You could say that.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me that more and more athletes are making more money outside of their actual sport than they make inside of their sport. And that just, highlights the importance of your role and how you can maximize, as you said with Pele, their personal brand and monetize out of that.
Absolutely. I mean, we're living in a really interesting time now. This, by the way, wasn't so much the case even 10 years ago, because what has happened in the last 5 to 10 years is that we've seen this intermediation of media, right? So in the years of, let's say, David Beckham, you had to be someone that the mainstream media elevated in popular culture. So if Sky Sports or BBC and ESPN, if those companies didn't do their job to elevate you as a star, it would have been very difficult to do, very difficult, if not impossible. Those barriers no longer exist. with the growth of digital media, of social media, the relationship that now that the players have with directly being able to communicate directly with their fans is nothing like we've ever seen. So you have someone like Vinicius Junior now, who's got 50 million followers. He's 22 years old, right? So he is a media business already. His reach is bigger than a lot of companies, than a lot of football clubs will put together, himself by himself. So this is, that's the opportunity. So now social media has given you the opportunity to reach people anywhere, wherever they happen to be. They can be in China, they could be in US, they could be in Brazil or in India, different platforms, different types of messages. So it is an exciting time and something that, again, a lot of talent can properly influence now and leverage in whichever way that they want. If they want to build a profile as someone who is really into fashion, they can do that, or someone who's a fitness enthusiast, they can do that, or someone who is into travel, they can build a brand and relevance around their passion points, and people will be attracted to them for things, as you say, that are outside of sport, and they will be able to create opportunities for themselves that are linked to those interest points that they have.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
It's fascinating.
You mentioned some of your previous work. You say you were a professional footballer, but you have been a consultant for Fox Sports, and you have been the global partnership director at Rangers Football Club. So what are some key learnings that you have taken from there that you can implement in your current role?
I think a couple big learnings. One is I've never stopped learning. I think in every job that I've ever had, in every role, I've always looked at it as an opportunity to grow and develop. Whether you're in that job for 2, 3, 4 years, and you don't know. I mean, the Rangers job, unfortunately, didn't last very long, but it was because of the situation that transpired at the club at the time financially. But I take on every opportunity to learn as much as I can whilst I'm there. So not just around the role that I'm doing, but everything else that's happening around that environment. So when I was at Rangers, for example, what I did most of the days is interact with other parts of the football club. That's one of the reasons I wanted to go there, is because whilst it was a big club, it was small enough where I can actually engage with hospitality team, with the football division, with the media team, with the marketing side of the business. Because we live in a world that's constantly evolving. So the idea that we just sort of stay in our lane and we're always going to do the same job and just go from one place to the next, I think it's completely outdated. The careers are we call sort of squiggly careers. You can go into so many different areas, and as I mentioned to you earlier, I never knew I would end up where I am now. But the more you learn, the more you understand how this universe in which you operate comes together, the better place you will be to navigate that and navigate it effectively, and to be in rooms and understand how everything comes together. So, whether that's when I was at Rangers, or when I was at Fox, and Fox was an opportunity for me to leverage a lot of my language skills and my understanding of Eastern Europe, because the European Championships in 2012 and the World Cup in 2018 were taking place in Russia and Ukraine. So it's for me, it's always a learning journey, and it's always an opportunity to network. So forever networking, forever meeting people, always investing in the relationships while I'm there, using that opportunity to meet others, and seeing how I can evolve as an individual and as a professional, regardless of what environment I'm in. Because ultimately, it's about investing, continuously investing in yourself and your understanding and expertise.
That's interesting. There are many guests on this podcast that says the same with learning and educating themselves. Several of the guests have gone back into taking an MBA or studying longer. And
I'm doing that now. I'm doing a mini marketing MBA as we speak. So absolutely.
And I think that's it's a good lesson learned for people who listen in, that you need to, as you said, the world keeps turning and it evolves, and you need to do that as well. And people who has made it to the top, they just don't stop there. If you're a CEO, it's not like, okay, I'm done. You need to continue to learn all the time, and that, I think that's a good lesson.
Yes, I learned that quite early on, and it served me well until now. And I just need to keep it fresh. It's important.
You have co-authored a book called Art of Branded Entertainment. What inspired you to write a book?
Well, I shouldn't take the credit for coming up with the idea. I mean, again, it's a great, the book is a great example of investing in people and investing in yourself and being at the right place at the right time. So the way this whole project came about is, whilst I've been working in different roles, I've always taken the opportunity to share my knowledge and expertise on the subjects in which I was involved in, through interviews, podcasts, events, and so on. So you over time, you become let's just say a subject matter expert, or someone that people know in the industry as, I suppose, as an expert. And I got an opportunity 5 years ago to be on the jury in Cannes for Cannes Lions, which is, for, in the world of marketing and advertising, it's the biggest, it's like the Oscars of our industry, where the best work from all over the world is being judged. And I was lucky enough to be invited to be on the jury that year for entertainment, and sport was part of entertainment category then. It's a separate category now. So I was there for, the way it happens is that, I'm there for a week, 10 hours a day in a room with 20 other people, some of the most accomplished, fascinating people I've ever met in my life, people who are in creative and PR and media and marketing and talent, and they come from all parts of the world. And it was following that experience, and because Cannes Lions are held in such high regard, our jury president, PJ, suggested that we write a book about what we talked about in that room, because it's so rare that, or actually it's never happened. You always announce the winners, but you never actually have the opportunity to tell the world of why the people that got together there looked at 2,000 different pieces of work and decided these were the best. So why do they think that? So what makes great work great? So I learned a great deal in the week that I spent with these people. And I thought that it was a great idea and an amazing opportunity for us to share our findings or opinions with the industry. So we got together and we decided that we will write a book and focus on, each one of us will focus on the different area that's specific to them, and say, what does great look like, for example, in sports marketing, and I'll use examples that we looked at and why I thought something was great and why other work I felt was missing certain elements of great work. So that was, it was an incredible experience, and I'll be forever grateful for the opportunity to be, part of that team.
Sounds interesting. I guess it can be bought on Amazon or something similar.
Yeah. You can buy it on Amazon. Yes. I highly recommend it. A lot of things we talked about 5 years ago are as true today as they were then.
Art of Branded Entertainment.
Yes.
If they want to check it out. Looking back on your career, has there been any bumps on the road? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Oh, big time. Look, I mentioned when I started out, I went into banking. That was my degree. Was when I retired, I didn't get to play for very long. Couldn't make any money. I went into banking and I spent 4 years, almost 5 years, in a job that deep down I knew wasn't for me. So, and it's difficult because I think we're all in our 20s trying to find our way, and I suppose these things evolve, and maybe I don't know if it's easier or harder these days, but certainly when I was going through that experience, it didn't feel to me like there were a huge amount of options. I feel like today people are much more open to trying different things and changing careers. I mean, this was in sort of 2000s when I thought, hey, I decided I'm going to go into banking. I guess this is what I'm going to be doing. Like the idea that you're just going to leave and become, I don't know, a marketeer or a journalist, like that just wasn't, not hugely unusual, but it wasn't happening a lot. So, there's a lot of soul searching, I think, in trying to decide what you do. Do you stay? Do you, do I follow my heart and because it didn't feel right and I could just see the writing on the wall. I was looking around. I thought, all of this, another 10 years will pass and I'll look back and say, well, I can't believe I didn't make that decision to leave. And now I don't have a choice. So certainly there came a time when I was sort of 26, 27, I thought, I have to do this. I've got to do this because if I don't, I'll never forgive myself. And sometimes you just have to follow I didn't know what I was getting into, but you just have to follow your heart. And if you're passionate about something and you can, I suppose at the time I didn't have too many responsibilities, I could afford to take the risk. And you do have to, take those risks from time to time. And then, look later when, once I'd come over and done my master's and gotten into the industry and I went to, you mentioned I was at Rangers. I was really looking forward to that opportunity at Rangers. And, 4 months into the job, the club goes into administration. I had just moved into a brand new apartment, signed a new lease. And I didn't know that it was going to be so short-lived. And it was from one day to the next. On a Friday, I received a call saying that everyone was being let go and the club was in administration. So again, lots of sort of soul searching then, because you start to sort of doubt yourself and, whether or not you made the right decision and where did you go from here? And I think in hindsight, when I look back at it on that chapter in my life, I'm grateful for it because all of the, it's part of our journey where I haven't met many people who haven't had some sort of setbacks. You've just got to keep going. At the end of the day, I had to remind myself that if I was good enough to get that job, I might not get another job next day, but I certainly was employable and I was good at what I do and I had a good reputation. It's just a matter of time. And what do you know? A couple of months, shortly after I got a consultancy agreement with Fox, but as soon as I got back, I've got this opportunity to work with Pele. So, Steve Jobs famously said that your life only makes sense when you look at it backwards. So when you look back on it, not when when you're there trying to look forward. So it taught me that that probably wasn't the last time I was going to come up against something that was challenging and tested me. And I think in some way sort of brought you down to earth and made you realize that, no matter how high you might feel, there's a chance that you might come down, but you just go through those experiences. Hopefully you have people in your life who can support you at that time in terms of I'm not talking about financially. I'm talking about just people who you can pick up the phone to and who can be there for you, who can guide you and just provide that emotional support more than anything. Because in my journey and in other people's journeys that I know, this is a consistent theme, not necessarily a consistent story in terms of what happens to people, but certainly people have had their ups and their downs, and many people have had much bigger downs than me. But I just take everything as part of the journey. And, so long as you don't forget what got you there in the first place and the fact that you have had and I've had success in my life and doing the things that I do is just, it's just a normal course of action.
Yeah. You said you don't forget where you came from and looking back. And I mean, you were born in Ukraine, right? Immigrated to the US when you were 13. Now you live in the UK. So you've been around. How do you think that this whole experience have impacted you?
Oh, hugely. I mean, I've got kids now, and I think one of the most important things that you can pass on is adaptability. This gift of adaptability. I've had to do it. I mean, some of this was by choice, some of this wasn't. My family immigrated in early 90s, right before Soviet Union collapsed. I didn't particularly want to go. I had a great childhood growing up in Kiev. I had many friends. I was in my teenage years. I played football. To go from from one day to another, to a country where I didn't speak the language at all, where I didn't know anybody, where there was such an animosity between the countries. So it's not like you were just coming from Canada. You came from a place that is widely considered to be US's number one enemy. So it was difficult. It was very, very difficult. And football for me was a saving grace. I was a good footballer. And it gave me the opportunity to immerse myself and integrate into culture. And from there on, and you adapt, you perhaps grow a thicker skin. I went to university. I didn't do particularly well my freshman year. I transferred and had an amazing experience when, transferred to a school where we won the national championship. I had an amazing football experience. I look back at those times and I realized that, you will make mistakes. You can only make decisions based on the information that is available to you at that moment in time. And sometimes you'll make mistakes. Not necessarily make mistakes, but it's as important in life to make decisions and realize on that journey what you don't want as what you do want. So, and I've always looked at it that way. I went to university. I went to a big school a long way from home, and I realized it's not really what I wanted. Once I got there, I thought, I don't like it. I feel lost here. I feel too far from home. This doesn't feel right. And that allowed me to sort of figure out where I needed to be. And once I got to my next place, I felt right at home. But what's interesting about that experience is that I could not have gone from A to C without going to B. You see what I mean? So I had to go through that process, to figure things out. And I think that's really important. I had to go and work, get my first job and have that experience to also understand what I don't like as much as what I want to do. So I think sometimes when people are going through their careers, they focus so much on what they want to do. And they feel like if they're not having a great time, that, they made a bad decision or it's a waste of time. It's not a waste of time because you're in that moment figuring out what you don't want and what doesn't feel right. And that is just as important as knowing what does feel right. And sometimes we don't know that until we go through that experience. So I knew that corporate environment wasn't right for me. In that sense, in finance. So I left. But, there's enough of those experiences to reflect on now that, help me with any situations that I might find myself in these days.
It's a lot to reflect back on, but adaptability, that's important. And in life, in business, in sports, in all aspects.
Indeed, yes.
Approaching the end here, is there something that I haven't mentioned that you would like to bring up?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered everything. I mean, if the podcast is about people and their journeys, I think I've been able to share mine. And I think the most important lesson that I would leave the listeners with is that no career is a straight line. And increasingly so now. There will be ups, there will be downs, there will be opportunities to go from one career to another. People change careers 3 or 4 times these days. So there are no rules. There are no rules that you have to hold yourself to. And you don't have to feel like there is an expectation to follow a certain path. Because I certainly haven't followed any path. And I may not follow any path going forward. That's just the nature of the world in which we live. My advice is that you try to figure out what it is that you really enjoy and what it is that you're really good at, and look for the opportunity to operate in a job or a company or an environment where you're able to do those things more often than not. Because if you can do that, then you will thrive.
That's good advice. The last question that I ask everyone is, if you could choose the next guest on this podcast, who do you think that I should talk to? Keeping in mind that I have already talked to Erkut on an earlier episode.
You already talked to... Well, have you spoken to our other friend, Daniel? Have you spoken to Daniel G?
Yes,
Yes.
Daniel G has been also on the podcast.
Oh, he's been on. Oh, well, you catch him. Yeah, I think you should host Jackie Fast.
Who's that?
A fascinating woman that I've got a chance to befriend and work with over many years. She had her own company, which she sold. She went on The Apprentice. She now has a fund which invests in athlete-led IP projects. I think Jackie's story is fascinating. So I think if you're looking to have an interesting guest on, one that's much more interesting than me, maybe not more interesting than Erika, then I would certainly recommend inviting Jackie.
That's a great guest, and you're all the same interesting. You have different, inputs from your different experiences. So everything is of great value.
Thank you. I'll be happy to introduce you if you're interested in doing that.
Thank you. Misha Sher, thank you so much for being on the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Marcus.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.